Imagine you are sitting in a doctor's surgery. You are terrified. You have just been told that your blood test results are back and indicate that you have a serious, perhaps even fatal, condition. Your world stops. You start thinking about your family, your will, and how little time you have left. After weeks of agony and spending thousands of dollars on further tests, you find out that nothing is wrong with you. You are perfectly healthy. The test was wrong. It wasn't just wrong by accident. It was wrong because the machine that ran it was faulty, invented by a 19-year-old college dropout who was more interested in becoming the next Steve Jobs than saving your life. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. It has actually happened to real people. We often talk about financial bubbles bursting or companies going bankrupt. But usually when a tech company fails, people just lose money. In this case, however, people could have lost their lives. This is the story of a $9 billion illusion. It's about how one young woman with a deep voice, a black turtleneck, and an unblinking stare hypnotized the smartest men in America. She charmed Henry Kissinger, fooled Rupert Murdoch, and defrauded the entire healthcare industry. This is the story of Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. It begs the question, how far can you fake it before you actually break it? To make sense of this madness, we have to go back to 2003. Elizabeth Holmes was a 19-year-old chemical engineering student at Stanford University. She has a phobia of needles. She hates them. It is from this fear that she forms a vision which sounds too good to be true, because it is. She dropped out of Stanford with a revolutionary idea, a patch or small device that can draw a single droplet of blood from your fingertip, a nanotainer, and instantly run hundreds of complex medical tests. No big needles, no vials of blood, and no waiting weeks for results. Just a prick, a drop, and the truth. It was the iPod of healthcare. It was going to democratize medicine. It was going to save millions of lives. The problem? The technology didn't exist. It was physically impossible. But in Silicon Valley, reality is often treated as just a suggestion. There's a culture there called fake it till you make it. The idea is that you sell the vision first, get the money, and then figure out how to build the product later. Elizabeth Holmes took this culture and amplified it. She started wearing the uniform, the black turtleneck inspired by her idol, Steve Jobs. She changed her persona. She allegedly lowered her voice to a deep baritone in an attempt to sound more authoritative in a male-dominated world. She practiced staring without blinking to assert dominance. She wasn't building a company. She was building a cult of personality. And it worked. Oh, how it worked. Investors flocked to her. But take a closer look at these investors. They weren't medical experts. They weren't biotech venture capitalists who understood blood chemistry. Had she pitched to them, they would have laughed her out of the room. Instead, she approached older, influential men from outside the medical profession. She secured an interview with George Shultz, the former Secretary of State. She also got Henry Kissinger. She even got General James Mattis. These men knew about war and diplomacy, but not microfluidics. They were charmed by her drive, patriotism, and story. They saw her as the granddaughter they wished they had. They joined her board of directors, lending Theranos an air of invincible credibility. Who would question a 22-year-old girl when Henry Kissinger was on her board? By 2014, Theranos was valued at $9 billion. Elizabeth Holmes appeared on the covers of Fortune, Forbes, and Inc. She was the youngest self-made female billionaire in history. She was hailed as the next great genius. But behind the scenes at the Theranos headquarters in Palo Alto, it was a different story. The machine they were promising, called the Ellison, was a disaster. It was supposed to be a sleek miniature laboratory. In reality, however, it was a box full of broken robotic arms and glue. When tests were run, the machine shook so violently that pieces fell off. Blood samples would spill inside the machine, creating a biohazard risk. Physically, the one drop of blood wasn't enough to run the tests. So what did they do? They lied. When investors or VIPs came to visit, they staged fake demonstrations. They would prick the investor's finger, put the blood in the Ellison machine, and make it produce a series of noises. Then the screen would display processing. But the machine wasn't doing anything. While the investor was drinking coffee with Elizabeth, a technician secretly took the blood sample, ran it over to a standard commercial analyzer, a massive machine made by Siemens that every other lab used, and ran the test there. However, because the sample was so small, just a drop, it had to be diluted with water to work on the large machine. This ruined the accuracy. So they were giving people scientifically inaccurate results. The deception went deep. They rigged the software. If a result was clearly wrong, the software would simply delete the problematic data points until the result appeared okay. It was fraud on an industrial scale. The turning point, the moment when this became a public safety crisis rather than just a financial scam, was when they partnered with Walgreens. Theranos wellness centers opened in Walgreens stores in Arizona and California. Real patients started coming in. They were getting tested for cancer, diabetes, pregnancy, and HIV. Imagine a woman being told she had miscarried when she was still pregnant. Or imagine a man being told his cancer had returned when it hadn't. Doctors were baffled. Or they would see a Theranos result that made no sense, send the patient to hospital for a retest, and receive a completely different result. Employees inside the company were terrified. Anyone who asked questions was either fired or threatened by Elizabeth's boyfriend and COO, Sunny Balwani. Balwani was the enforcer. He created a culture of fear and paranoia. Employees' emails were monitored, and their comings and goings from the building were tracked. It wasn't a startup. It was a dictatorship. But every house of cards has a weak spot. For Theranos, that weak spot was a brave young man named Tyler Schultz. He was the grandson of George Schultz, a board member. He worked at Theranos and witnessed the fraud firsthand. He witnessed quality control failures. He saw the lies. When he tried to tell his grandfather, "Grandpa, this is a lie," George Schultz didn't believe him. He sided with Elizabeth over his own grandson. He told Tyler to be quiet, but Tyler didn't shut up. Instead, he contacted a reporter at the Wall Street Journal named John Carreyrou. Carreyrou is the hero of this story. He started digging. He interviewed former employees, doctors, and patients. He realized that the emperor had no clothes. In October 2015, he published a bombshell article revealing that the Ellison machine didn't work, and that Theranos was using competitor machines to run its tests. Elizabeth Holmes went on the offensive. She appeared on television and famously said, "This is what happens when you try to change things. First they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world." She attempted to portray the fraud as innovation. She tried to silence the whistleblowers through legal action. She lied to her investors until the very last moment. But the dam had broken. Federal regulators descended on the laboratories. They discovered that the tests were inaccurate and dangerous. Elizabeth Holmes was banned from running a blood testing business. Walgreens sued. Investors sued too. The SEC charged her with massive fraud. Theranos' valuation plummeted from $9 billion to zero. It evaporated. In 2022, Elizabeth Holmes was found guilty of defrauding investors on 4 counts. The woman who aspired to be the next Steve Jobs became the face of Silicon Valley's darkest impulse, the belief that the truth is merely an obstacle to be overcome. So what is the lesson of the $9 billion lie? It shows that in the worlds of high finance and technology, charisma can be a dangerous drug. Investors wanted to believe in the fairy tale of a 19-year-old genius who would save the world so badly that they forgot to ask for evidence. They saw a visionary in the black turtleneck, but they should have seen a criminal. Silicon Valley's motto, "Move fast and break things," might work when building a photo-sharing app, but not when running a company. If the app crashes, nobody gets hurt. But when dealing with human health, moving fast and breaking things means breaking people. Elizabeth Holmes is now in a federal prison. The black turtlenecks are gone. Her fake deep voice has reportedly vanished. However, the mark she left on the medical industry remains. She proved that you can steal millions at gunpoint, but you can steal billions with a story. While we all love a good story, the Theranos saga reminds us that the most boring thing in the world, peer-reviewed data, is sometimes the only thing that keeps us safe. Next time a charismatic founder promises you a miracle that defies the laws of physics, remember the drop of blood that wasn't there. Remember the $9 billion that disappeared into thin air. Because ultimately, blood doesn't lie. People do.